As 2021 begins, IntelliSpark is excited to sponsor a new addition to School Council Central entitled SCCchats. These chats will bring together K-12 educators for a brief discussion on a topic or question related to K-12 student success. They seek to offer insight, strategies, and tips to consider for supporting students in our schools. My name is Mary Dockin, Vice President of Outreach at IntelliSpark. I'm pleased to kick off this first conversation with Dr. Deb Hardy and Dr. Matt Liberatore. As the founder of School Council Central, Deb needs no introduction. Matt is also no stranger to SCC, as he recently served as a panelist in December for a discussion we sponsored on counseling in a time of COVID. We're delighted for them to be our inaugural guests for our first SCC chat. As the reality of COVID set in last spring, what could be planned for and expected for many students suddenly changed. School activities were canceled and needed to be reimagined. The end of the school year and the start of the school year activities that kindergarten students to seniors in high school look forward to were now very different. The feeling of disappointment and a sense of loss or even failure is something students, parents, and educators experience. These student experiences continue to be unpredictable as COVID-19 impacts the school community and our students' lives and the educators supporting them. Deb and Matt, what I'd love to hear from you about is, what are you finding as you work with students and staff? And what ideas do you have about how we can support students in developing coping skills and the self-awareness to deal with unexpected setbacks? Deb, I know you and I recently chatted about this, and I'd like to turn it over to you to begin to share what you're seeing with the students you're supporting, and take it away.
So thank you, Mary, for having me, and Matt, thank you for being on again. Let's give some great insight. I love working with you guys and sharing ideas. I have, just to give a perspective, I have a caseload of 128 students, grades 9 through 12. So I'm glad you mentioned the idea of loss and grief, because throughout the year that we've been in this pandemic, there tends to be a higher level of loss and grief coming into play social emotionally. In addition to that, I'm also seeing this lack of purpose, right? Our students have depended on our schools as their safe haven, as their location to find a little bit of purpose, be it they like social studies or sports or clubs, whatever it might be. And now that that has really refrained, or we're remote, or we're in and out, you know, we're like a little switch. 1 minute we're in school, we're out, in, out. All this sense of loss and grief has also questioned, what is my purpose? So through the process of meeting with students that I've been doing, I put a pause on why I'm meeting with students, right? In terms of academics, social emotional, college career. And I started looking at my own data. What are these students saying to me in my meetings? You know, certainly I have individual meetings. I spend an hour with each of them. And I'm finding that this grief and lack of coping skills to handle this loss, and I'm going to call it grief, as well as coping skills to find my purpose, are really needed. And I know for educators, it's extremely difficult right now because they're trying to teach content. I can only imagine for student support systems trying to connect with everybody and do what schools are telling them to do, which is, you know, let's do scheduling right now. So I talk a lot with the kids now about what courses are you going to take next year. So as professionals, we're continuing our process in the schools, but we need to put a pause, even if it's for one professional development hour, and say, what are our students saying to us, and what do we need to do to support them? Because I can only imagine that when schools open up in September, and I'm hoping for that with a vaccine, we're going to be dealing with a lot of emotional issues and mental health. So I hope that set the stage, right?
Well, it absolutely does, and it just makes me think about something that I've been putting into practice as I talk to colleagues. And I'd be really curious, Matt, about your thoughts of this. It really is that starting point of asking those that we work with, students. And Matt, I know you supervise a lot of staff individuals across different high schools, but the question is really, how are you doing? And I'd really be curious, Matt, how you see that play out with um, your staff, and then in turn, how they can help the students they're serving.
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed Deb's opening and her context there. I do want to kind of add something to that a little bit and to speak about the coping skills. And this goes for students and adults. And so this goes for the students and the staff members. And I'm also a clinical mental health provider. And when we talk about coping skills, what I'm finding is a lot of these sports activities, a lot of these connecting with friends were their coping skills.
Mhm.
Those were actually their ways that they did either cope with the stress that they have at home, or maybe the coping with the stress of a loss of a family member at that time. They would go and hang out with their friends to get their mind off of things. And what's happening now is a lot of that stuff is shut down. And so what's happening is that's where some of so we have compounded grief of a pandemic, and then also some of those coping skills or ways that people were able to kind of de-stress are not there anymore. And so to speak to your point, um, I'm always asking people, like, what are you doing to just like get your mind off of things? What are you doing that's, I hate to use the word dissociate, but it's a way to actually dissociate from your present day level of stress. And then also, what are you doing to ways to connect with others? Because this is really a pandemic of isolation in a certain extent. And so, how are you connecting with others in a non-work environment? Because I'll tell you what, from the school setting, what somebody would do, the capacity level in a regular environment is now like threefold. And so it's very taxing. And so what are people doing for their own mental health? Whether it be yoga, exercising, carving out that time, going for a walk for coffee. And I know it sounds silly, but I would always ask all my clients, like, are you getting out of the house even for 5 minutes to get a cup of coffee? And it's these small little micro skills that I think people are really having to practice that make a big, big difference.
Mhm.
I'd be curious, Deb, are you finding any things that your students are doing that they may be sharing with you, um, or things that you're encouraging them to do
Mhm.
that's been helpful?
Yeah, I agree with everything Matt said there too. Just to add for one piece with the administration and adults in the building and all that, I think as a suggestion, sort of to how will we handle all this mental health when it comes in, I think we have to have some candid conversations right now about what is on my plate as a mental health support team, what can get off and go to other plates so that we can focus on meeting with students all the time. So I'm just going to pose that because I think it is a time that systems have to go back and look at how they deliver things in support of students coming back, because coming back to school will be an issue. The kids have not been there for over a year, or they've been in and out, in and out. So transition, so coping ideas, having a program of transition for students to come back slowly and build relationships. So a lot of schools may have like a peer mentoring system, or they may have, I know we used to use in the school, our physical education teachers did a lot of team building exercise in physical education, but we used it not only for the adults as professional development, but also for the students when they came in for their orientation. So that's one piece. I utilize a lot of interest. Us counselors do interest inventories, career inventories, aptitude inventories, and we tend to do them and then they sit to the side. Here's a great opportunity to bring them back and talk to students about, hey, you're interested in learning how to cook because you want to go into baking or culinary arts. And there are some free resources online right now, like Coursera, edX, and I think Master Skill, I may have that one wrong, where students can go in and learn how to do things and do trial and error from a big learning, or the simplest things about, you know what, let me go through my closet and do my early spring cleaning. And I have a lot of sports equipment that I don't use anymore because I don't play these sports. So let's do a drive to donate them to schools and urban centers where the need is there. And you're going to find this sense of reward and accomplishment. So those are two that I've started to sort of broadcast there.
Matt, are you finding things that your team is doing in terms of, I know we've talked about some of the group work that you've been able to incorporate during this time of distance learning and hybrid learning, and
We've had some fantastic virtual events, and that's what I just want to go back to. As the vaccine comes out and we do transition back to what could potentially be a normal year, I think it's really important to take snapshots of the things that worked really, really well, because it's a new normal. We're going back to a new normal, and there's new modes of delivery. And I'm just thinking right now, we hosted a wonderful virtual post-secondary advising event where we had over 100 seniors on at one time. And we talked about the university. We actually started some early advising, some actual freshmen level curriculum they learn from their freshman advisor when they get to college. We actually started teaching some of that to seniors ahead of time so that they can start to kind of take out some of that anxiety and some of that guessing game of what's next, and really start to prepare them. And so we've had some great success with that, some great success with some of our applications. I mean, our applications are actually up for a couple of our universities. And I think it's because of the virtual support and being able to support in that way. And I also think it is capturing on people's strengths, really, really logging and charting and making sure that staff members, whether it be teachers or counselors or even support staff, have a really understanding of a student's strengths and being able to talk to them about their strengths. If we talk about from a strength-based mentality or a growth mindset, really like reminding students that they have strengths and how to leverage those and focus on those. I think that's crucially important right now.
And Mary, can I just jump in terms of collaborating with teachers? I think as Matt was talking about curriculum, I think it's essential that now we don't do curriculum in silos. English does English, math does math, science does science. I'm a big proponent of where can student support systems bump into the curriculum of each of the content areas. So just to give you some idea, I do professional development for educators, and I've been talking to some English teachers about incorporating the idea of elementary school counseling morning meetings into your English. So students have a journal. They love to journalize, even if it's doodling in the journal, let them do that, but let them have 10 minutes every day to just write what's on their mind, how they're feeling, and collaborate with student support with that.
I want to add to that, if you don't mind. I was working on a piece of literature that's going to be published, and one of those was in there, and in some of the research I was doing was talking about never has there been a more important time to incorporate SEL skills. And if I'm going to be concrete with giving you an example, math class, we all know that students can get frustrated or get emotionally flooded or nervous when they don't get a problem. And so how's the math teacher, incorporating those SEL skills to pay attention to when they're becoming emotionally, anxious, and incorporating breathing techniques or pause breaks or different skill sets like that not only apply to math, but then apply to any time the student becomes dysregulated. And so how are we incorporating some of these skills in our daily curriculum as well? And that's just one example of about 100 in different classes that can actually be done, that actually can help the teacher with their skill set.
So Matt, with the math is the hardest class to bring in SEL. And it's funny, when I worked in my prior district, our middle school counselors collaborated with the math teachers because pedometers, I'm dating myself, pedometers were the in thing. So we purchased pedometers and we collaborated actually with a phys ed teacher, the math teacher, and the school counselors, so that phys ed had the kids walk with the pedometers. Now, you know, you have the fit. The math teacher showed them how to graph it, and the counselor had a discussion on how are you feeling when you walk? How do you reduce your stress? There's a great collaborative approach. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I want to thank both of you for your time. It's just delightful always to be together with you. And I know that you've provided some insights for those that will be joining us or are joining us. And we look forward to future opportunities to get back together, as well as inviting additional educators to share on different topics. You know, your insights and strategies really have helped us reflect on our experiences this morning, and we will be sharing this as a recording on SCC so that we invite our viewers to pass this on to a colleague and to let us know what ideas that you have. What are you encountering as well as your students and you are dealing really with this unprecedented time. So Matt and Deb, I want to thank you. I also want to share with those joining us that Matt and Deb are frequent bloggers for the Our Thoughts in Telespark blog, and I would be remiss as the editor of that wonderful series not to put a plug in for their contributions, which are filled with rich ideas. And so I will be sure that a link to that blog series is available to the SCC community. And I hope that you will enjoy following the work of both Deb and Matt. So thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.